I had the chisel wedged under a crust of barnacles on a stone face when the whole ocean flinched. Not a wave, not a current. A pressure flinch. My mask sucked tight for a split second like something outside my skull took a slow breath. The frame bit my cheekbones. The chisel kicked in my glove. The barnacles didn't crack the way they always do. They slid. The whole cluster peeled away in one ugly sheet, like a scab coming off wet skin, and the statue underneath looked too clean, too smooth, like it had been waiting for me to touch it so it could shrug the growth off. I kicked back, and my tank rang off its shoulder with that hollow, bell-like clang you only get from dense stone underwater. The figure didn't wobble. It didn't tip. It stayed planted in the sand like it had roots, like it was part of the seabed, and I was the thing that didn't belong. I hovered there and forced myself to do what you're supposed to do. Blame your own body first. Underwater, you always assume you're the problem. You swallowed weirdly. You breathed wrong. Your reg hiccuped. Your mask seal flexed. If you start blaming the environment right away, you die trying to fix a ghost. Except I saw the sand around its base. Fresh scrape lines. Not old ripples. Not storm scour patterns. Clean, cut grooves like somebody dragged the statue a meter and set it back down again. The ridges were sharp, not softened by settling. The sand looked handled. I pinged the comms, thumb heavy on the button, because it suddenly felt important to hear another human voice. You feel that. Current shift. Nothing. Just my own breathing, the steady hiss of air, and that faint dry crackle in the line like someone holding a mic too close to fabric. We were at a site locals called The Garden, because coastal towns will slap a cute name on anything as long as it sells t-shirts. On paper, it was a submerged art installation. The town council talked about reef restoration and tourism and culture. In reality, it was a bunch of concrete figures sunk in a sheltered cove years back, so rich people could snorkel above them and feel haunted in a safe, curated way. Storm season had been brutal. A nor'easter tore the buoy line loose, ripped half the markers clean, and shoved the whole installation down the slope past tourist depth. The town wanted the statues secured. The sponsor wanted them cleaned for a documentary. My contractor wanted billable hours and no lawsuits. So there I was 30-something meters down, in cold green water that ate light, scraping a face that suddenly felt less like art and more like a person holding still on purpose. The dive plan had been simple. Too simple. Dropping off the workboat, follow the temporary line to the ring, clear growth from 3 statues the sponsor wanted hero shots of, bag a few samples for their little ecology segment, then come up clean and boring and paid. I'd done rig work, salvage, dock inspections, dam intakes, the kind of jobs where you spend half your life tasting metal through your mouthpiece and the other half listening to grown men argue about paperwork while you try not to get crushed. Statues were supposed to be easy money. Brush, chisel, bag, smile for the client done. The only wild card was Trent. Trent was the safety diver they'd assigned to me. Younger than me by a decade, built like a gym ad, loud even through a mouthpiece. He had that attitude some guys get when they've got enough dives to be confident, but not enough to be careful. Everything's content. Everything's a story. Everything's a chance to look like the toughest guy in the water. He'd been running his mouth since the boat, calling the garden creepy, making jokes about haunted mermaids, telling the deckhand he was in a pose for selfies with the statues once we were done, like this was a theme park and not a job where mistakes get you folded into a body bag. He hovered above me now, finning lazy circles like he owned the ocean. His lights swung around, catching on algae like it was glitter. He drifted lower and came right up to the face I'd been working on. A human head, blank eyes, mouth half open. He aimed his beam into the mouth and tapped the teeth with his glove like he was checking a horse. I flashed him the hand sign for back off. Get out of my work area. Don't kick silt into my face. He waved me off. Big dramatic shrug. He loved waving me off. He loved being the guy who wasn't scared. I yanked my slate out, scribbled fast with the pencil tethered to my wrist, and shoved it in his line of sight. Move marks. He glanced, tilted his head, shrugged again like I'd written boo, Then he did the dumbest possible thing, the thing you never do around something you don't understand. He grabbed the statue's wrist and pulled. The figure didn't budge. Trent's whole body drifted backward from the effort. He laughed into his reg, that muffled bark of bubbles, and pointed at me like I'd spooked myself over nothing. I wanted to punch him. Right there, right through his expensive mask. Instead, I forced my hands back to the chisel, because jobs end when you finish them, not when you win arguments, and under stress my brain clings to work like it's a rope. I scraped. I pried. I broke off growth and stuffed it into the sample bag. I kept glancing at the sand around the base because those drag marks didn't soften. They stayed sharp like they'd been made minutes ago. And then I noticed something else. The other statues weren't where they were supposed to be. I'd studied the layout on deck. I'd done the boring part, the thing people like Trent skip. I memorized the plan like you memorize exits in a building you don't trust. The garden had a central ring, figures arranged in a rough circle around an open patch. On the map, the ring had breathing room. You could swim between figures without brushing them. They all faced inward, like they were watching a stage. Down here, the ring felt tighter. Not by a huge amount. Not enough for someone who didn't care. Half a meter, maybe. Enough that if you didn't have a mental picture from the surface, your brain would accept it as normal. Enough that you could blame bad memory or silt or the way distance lies underwater. But I'd seen those scrape lines, and the ring didn't feel like a storm shift. It felt like a crowd. I kicked over to the next figure the sponsor wanted cleaned, a kneeling woman with her arms out, palms up like she was begging. I shone my light under her hands. Sand sat packed into the grooves where fingerprints would be, like putty pushed into a mold. I pressed my own glove into the seabed right beside her hand to compare. My imprint stayed soft, edges slumping immediately. Her fingerprint sand stayed hard and shaped, crisp lines like clay that had been pressed and set. My throat tightened around the mouthpiece. That taste you get when adrenaline hits metal and salt and something sour like the inside of a battery. I checked my compass out of reflex. No espin, no whirlpool. It sat steady, boring. The ocean wasn't doing a magnetic trick. That made it worse, somehow, because it meant the problem wasn't physics being weird. It was something choosing to be weird. I looked for Trent. He drifted toward the center patch, fiddling with his camera housing. Of course he had. He was setting up shots, making himself the hero of somebody else's documentary. He lifted the camera and did a slow pan like he was filming a nature special, not standing in the middle of a ring of dead-eyed figures. Then his lights flickered once. Not a power failure, not a loose wire, more like a blink, dim for a heartbeat, then back to full, like the water had swallowed his beam and spat it out. Trent paused, angled his head, and stared down into the center. The empty patch in the middle of the ring wasn't empty. It was darker than the rest of the sand, like a bruise in the seabed. A circular area where sediment didn't settle right. It looked slightly lower, like a shallow bowl, a depression that shouldn't be there, because the slope here was consistent. It wasn't an anchor scar. It wasn't a gas seep. I'd seen both. This looked intentional, like the ocean had pressed a thumb into the bottom. I heard a sound then that didn't come through comms. A ping, soft, distant like sonar. One clean tone that traveled through the water and into my teeth. Then another, slower, like something taking its time. We didn't have an active transducer down here. The boat wasn't pinging. This wasn't the Coast Guard. It wasn't a nearby ship. The sound was too close, too intimate, like it was inside the water around us, not coming through it. Trent kicked toward the bruise anyway, because Trent only learned by touching the stove. He landed on the edge of it and put one fin in. His fins sank, not like sinking into soft sand. It dropped like the sand had turned to water just in that spot, then grabbed again. He jerked his leg back. The fin came out slow, reluctant, like something under the sand had a grip and didn't want to let go. He looked up at me and threw a big what the fuck gesture, finally serious, finally present. I pushed off and swam hard toward him, reaching for his harness strap, because the only plan that made sense was get him the hell away from the thing that was swallowing his feet. The moment my glove touched his webbing, the dark patch pulsed. A slow, outward swell of silt rolled across the sand like a breath. The ring of statues shivered. I heard grinding, stone on stone, low and ugly, not the clean scrape of a fin on rock. More like knees and shoulders shifting, joints that weren't built to move, forcing themselves anyway. Trent's eyes went wide behind his mask. He tried to push off the seabed, but his fin dipped again and caught. He flailed for balance, kicked harder, and planted his other foot. Both fins sank to the ankle. He stared straight at me, panic sharp in his pupils, and started yanking his legs like a man stuck in mud. The statues moved. Not fast, not dramatic. Small, awful increments. Shoulders turning, heads angling, knees grinding through sand. They didn't stride like monsters. They adjusted like people making room in a crowd, all shifting to get a better view of something happening in the middle. They were tightening the ring. My chest went tight, breathing suddenly loud in my ears. I grabbed Trent's tank valve and pulled with everything I had. My suit creaked. My forearms burned. I felt the harness webbing bite through my gloves. Trent's legs didn't come free. The patch held him like a mouth. He thrashed and scent sealed up in clouds, making everything hazier, making the statues harder to track. That haze felt wrong, like it came too easy, like the seabed wanted us blind. Trent reached down to unclip his fins. His fingers fumbled on the buckle. He got one open, straps snapping loose, and he yanked his foot. And his boot didn't fit through the opening anymore. Not the boot, as in it slipped off. The boot, as in his ankle, was suddenly too big, like the sand had tightened around it and formed a collar. It had shaped itself around him. It had made a custom fit. Trent made a sound through his reg that wasn't a laugh anymore. It was a bubbling wail, raw panic with nowhere to go. I jammed my knife out of its sheath. I drove the blade into the sand collar and hacked like a lunatic, sawing at whatever held him because my brain refused any other option. The knife hit something hard under the sediment. Not rock, something smoother, something that rang faintly when steel struck it. My blade caught. The sand around it hardened instantly. Not gradually, not like it compacted. It set like cement the moment the knife stopped moving, like it cured on contact. My knife stuck in place like it had been welded. I yanked. Nothing. The bruise wasn't sand. It was something using sand like clothing. Trent's chest heaved. His bubbles went wild. He was burning air fast, sucking his tank down with panic breaths. He grabbed my forearm with both hands, fingers crushing my suit, like he could pull himself out through me. I pointed at his reg, at his gauge, trying to force him to slow down. He didn't. He couldn't. His eyes kept darting to the statues. Because the statues were closer now. One of them, a standing figure with its arm raised like it was waving, had dragged forward enough that its fingers brushed Trent's shoulder. The touch looked gentle for a second, a hand on a friend. Then the raised hand flexed, not into a fist, into a grip. Fingers pinched his suit fabric and tugged him sideways. Trent's body slid a few inches. The sand collar around his ankles didn't give. It tightened and stretched instead, like it wanted him longer, like it wanted him to fit a mold. Rage hit me hard, stupid rage. The kind you get when you can't accept what's happening and your body picks the only emotion that feels like action. I let go of him for half a second to free my stuck knife, grabbing the handle with both hands and wrenching until my shoulder screamed. That half second cost him. The sand collar snapped upward like a trap springing. It climbed his calves in a smooth surge, swallowing boot, shin, knee. It didn't splash. It didn't plume. It just rose and sealed around him like a sleeve being pulled on. Trent's legs vanished to mid-thigh. He jerked violently, and I saw his suit fabric wrinkle like pressure build under it. His thigh looked too thin all at once, like something under the sand was pulling the meat tight against bone. He tried to scream and sucked water because his mouthpiece half shifted when he thrashed. His sound turned into a broken gargle, bubbles shredding it. I slapped his reg back into place, jammed it against his mouth, and hit his mask seal with my palm like that would somehow fix the ocean trying to eat him. His eyes locked on mine, and in that instant his expression changed. It wasn't help me. It was don't let me go in there. I grabbed his harness again and pulled until my shoulder popped with a sick little click and heat shot down my arm. Pain flashed white behind my eyes. I pulled anyway, teeth clenched on a mouthpiece, so hard my jaw ached. The statues kept grinding. They were so close now I could see details I hadn't noticed before. Micro cracks around the mouths like dried lips. Pitted cheeks like old scars. Deep hollows where eyes should be. Some had faint streaks down their faces where algae had run, like tear tracks that never dried. A ping sounded again. Slower. Closer. Like whatever was pinging was listening for us to stop moving. Trent's hands clawed at my arms. Then the sand rose past his hips. Fast, not a slow sink into mud. A deliberate pull, like something reeling him in. He reached for his fin strap with one hand, tried to undo the other buckle, fingers shaking too hard to work it. The statue hand gripping his shoulder tugged again, just a little, and the sand surged like it got excited. Trent smacked the seabed once with his palm. Twice. The prints he left didn't slump. They hardened. They held their shape like impressions in wet cement. His arms disappeared to the elbow. I caught something in my beam, then a glint in the algae on a nearby statue's hand. Stainless steel. A buckle. A fondbuke. Not coral encrusted. Not old. Clean. Fresh. Like it had been placed there. Trent saw it too. His eyes went even wider, and he made a strangled sound, tried to point, but his shoulders were already going under. I pulled harder, stupidly, like I could outmuscle the seabed. My suit stretched. My fingers went numb to gloves. Trent's mask bumped my forearm as he sank, and for a fraction of a second his whole face was right there, inches from mine behind glass, eyes huge and wet and furious with fear. Then his head dipped. His mask slid into the bruise like it was never there. His bubbles stopped. The seabed went still. The ring stopped grinding like someone had flipped a switch. And I hovered there, shaking in the water, because my brain refused to accept that a man could vanish in his sand in under a minute. I waited for him to pop back up, for a hand to burst through, for anything human. All I got was the faintest gurgle from my own throat and the cold, gnawing realization that I was alone with this thing now. Something hard brushed my fin. I spun so fast my light swung wild and caught the faces around me. A circle of blank expressions lit one by one like a firing squad. A statue stood behind me where there hadn't been a statue 30 seconds earlier. Same posture Trent had at the edge of the bruise. 1 foot forward, arms half raised like he was trying to balance. The surface wasn't fully grown over yet. It looked too fresh, like the ocean hadn't had time to dress it up with algae. And the face, it wasn't a carved face. It was the shape of a diver's mask, smooth where glass should be, like the mask had become part of the stone. A hint of strap around the back of the head. The suggestion of a mouthpiece fused to the jawline. At the ankle, embedded in the half-hardened sandstone, there was a torn edge of neoprene. The garden didn't just move things. It made new pieces. I didn't look for Trent again. I didn't do the brave recovery diver thing. I didn't circle the site. I didn't check the center. All the training in the world doesn't matter when your instincts are screaming run and you still have a choice. I kicked up and away, so hard my calves cramped. My light shook. My breathing went ragged. The ring faded behind me in green haze, but I could still hear the grinding in my head like it had printed itself into my skull. As soon as I crossed what felt like the boundary of the ring, an invisible line in the water, the comms cleared like someone lifted a hand off a microphone. The crackle dropped. A human voice slammed into my ear, sharp and annoyed. "Where the hell are you? Talk to me." It took me a second to understand language again. My throat locked. My tongue felt too thick. I tried to answer, and all that came out was this strangled exhale that fogged my mask. So I did what divers do when words fail. I grabbed the line and yanked a hard tug sequence, the kind you don't use unless shit is real. Emergency. The surface crew haul me like a fish on a hook. Too fast. Way too fast. I felt it in my ears first, that stabbing pressure change. Then in my joints, a deep ache like someone twisting screws into my elbows and knees. I should have signaled to slow. I didn't. I wanted out of that water more than I wanted an intact body. I broke the surface and air hit me like a slap. The boat rocked under my hands. I scrambled onto the ladder with one good arm because the other felt wrong, numb, and burning at the same time. Hands grabbed my harness and dragged me onto the deck. Someone ripped my mask up and cold air hit my face and I gagged. Not because I was sick, but because without the reg my mouth suddenly remembered how the ocean tasted and it wanted to vomit back. I did vomit, right there on the non-slip deck. A sour rush of bile and seawater and blood, because I'd bitten my own tongue at some point and hadn't noticed. The supervisor, Rick, thick neck, clipboard brain, was already in my face, red with anger. He didn't ask if I was alive. He didn't ask where Trent was. He asked about the schedule. What the fuck was that? You just blew the dive. I tried to say Trent's gone. I tried to say something ate him. What came out was a croak and a hand gesture that probably looked like I was drunk. The sponsor rep pushed in two. This woman in a clean jacket like she didn't belong on a workboat, eyes scanning my gear like she was counting dollars. Where's the camera? Did you get the shot? You were supposed to. I snapped. It wasn't heroic. It was ugly. I shoved her back with my good hand hard enough she stumbled into the rail. I heard somebody bark my name like I crossed a line. Get the fuck away from me, I said, voice shredded. He's gone. He's fucking gone. Rick grabbed my shoulder strap, yanked me toward him like I was a dog. Who's gone? Where's Trent? I pointed at the water. Just pointed like that could translate the whole nightmare. Down. He got stuck. He went under. Rick stared at me like I'd spoken nonsense. Stuck in what? Sand? Jesus Christ. I tried to take my helmet off and my hand shook too bad. Someone went to help and I slapped their hand away, half out of fear, half out of rage, because in my head I could still feel Trent's gloved fingers crushing my arm. I didn't want anyone touching me. The deckhand, a kid with wide eyes, looked from me to the water like he expected Trent to pop up any second, laughing, waving, making a prank. The sponsor rep recovered her balance, face tight with offense. If this is some stunt because you're unhappy with the contract. I almost hit her. I almost did it. My fist clenched and my whole body leaned forward. Rick stepped between us and shoved me back. Enough. Sit the fuck down before you fall overboard. I didn't sit. I paced. I couldn't stop moving. My wet suit dripped on the deck, and the water running off me looked darker than it should have, like it carried that bruise with it. Rick barked orders. Someone grabbed the radio. Someone else grabbed the spare mask, and fins like they were about to send another diver down. No, I said, loud enough that everyone looked. No, nobody goes down there. Rick's face twisted. That's not your call. It's a fucking mouth, I said, and the words sounded insane out loud, which made it worse. It's not just sand. Shut up. The sponsor rep snapped, like I was embarrassing her. We need confirmation. We need footage. Rick nodded toward the equipment rack. Drop the ROV. We'll see what happened. I grabbed his sleeve with my numb hand, and pain shot up my arm like electricity. Rick, listen to me. Don't. He ripped his arm away. You're bent and you're panicking. Sit down. They dropped the ROV like it was a routine inspection. The little machine went over the side, tether humming, camera feed popping up on the monitor under the canopy. Everyone crowded around it like it was a TV. The screen showed green water, then the slope, then the garden coming into view. My stomach turned as the ring appeared. Neat. Clean. Exactly like the brochure. Statues standing, kneeling, reaching. Space between them. Center patch smooth and pale like any other sand. No bruise. No drag marks. No new diver-shaped figure. Nothing that matched what I just lived through. The sponsor rep actually smiled, small and smug. See? There's nothing. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. I leaned closer, eyes burning, scanning every statue like I could will the truth into existence. The ROV light swept slow, making shadows crawl over stone faces. It drifted around the ring. Rick muttered something about maybe he swam off, like Trent had just wandered away. Then the camera angle shifted a hair. For half a second, the light caught something bright in one statue's hand. A clean, stainless buckle. Not algae-covered, not old. Sharp edges, fresh metal, exactly like the ones on Trent's fins. My breath stopped. It felt like that pressure blink again, like the ocean inhaled and my mask wasn't there to protect me this time. I jabbed a finger at the screen so hard my nail clicked the plastic. There, you see that? Rick leaned in. The sponsor rep's smile vanished. Her eyes flicked to Rick, then to the monitor, then away like she hadn't seen anything. That's probably debris, she said too fast. Fishing gear. Rick's face tightened. He looked at the deckhand, holding the controller. Hold it there. The deckhand froze, thumb hovering. The statue hand on the screen looked like it curled slightly as the light moved. Not a full movement, just enough that my skin prickled. Ping. A single soft tone came through the boat's hull, not through the speakers. Everyone went quiet for a second, heads tilting without meaning to, like animals hearing a sound they can't place. The sponsor rep snapped, "Cut it." Rick blinked. "What?" "Cut the feed," she said again, sharper, like she was giving an order on her own boat. "We've got enough. Liability-wise, we've got enough." Rick hesitated. He looked at the buckle again. He looked at me. He looked at the crew, all of them suddenly not wanting to be the one who says what it looks like. The sponsor rep didn't hesitate. She reached past the deckhand and hit the power switch herself. The monitor went black, and the absence of that image felt like a hand closing over my mouth. The screen went black, and for a second nobody moved, like if we stood still enough the ocean would pretend nothing happened. Then the world snapped back into its usual bullshit. Rick rounded on me first. He didn't look scared. He looked inconvenienced. "You're going to tell me exactly what happened," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, like volume could drag Trent back up. I wiped my mouth with the back of my glove and got seawater in my lips. Salt and bile and that copper taste you get when you're close to puking blood. "He stepped in it," I said. "He sank." The statues moved. The sponsor rep made a noise like a laugh, but uglier. Statues moved. Rick shoved his finger at my face. "Stop saying dumb shit. You're bent. You're panicking. You want to tell ghost stories, do it on land." "I'm not bent." I lied automatically because I didn't want them to slow down and start thinking. I wanted them to take it seriously, and they never take anything seriously unless it's a lawsuit. "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. My left shoulder throbbed like it had a heartbeat of its own. My knees felt like they were full of ground glass. Every time I swallowed, my jaw clicked. And under all of that, deep in my bones, I felt that pressure blink again like the ocean had noticed we were still talking about it. The deckhand, the kid, hovered near the rail with both hands clenched, looking over the side like Trent might pop up any second, coughing and laughing and calling a prank. He kept opening his mouth like he wanted to ask something, then shutting it like he was afraid to make it real. Rick barked at him anyway. "Get the radio. Call it in." The sponsor rep cut him off. "No." Rick turned. "What do you mean, no?" She stepped closer, voice low like she wanted to keep it inside our little circle. "We need to be careful what we say. If you report an incident at a commercial dive site tied to a public installation, the town shuts it down. The film shuts down. Everyone loses money." Rick stared at her like she just said the quiet part out loud, and he didn't know if he hated her for it or respected her for being that cold in the open. I couldn't stop myself. "A guy's gone." She didn't even look at me. "We don't know that," she said, eyes on Rick. "We have no confirmation." I laughed. It came out sharp and cracked. "No confirmation, right? Because the ocean doesn't give you a receipt." Rick's face twitched. He turned away from her and pointed at me again. "You," he said. "Seat. Drink water. Breathe. You're not going anywhere until we figure out what the hell you did down there." What I did. My voice rose, and I hated it because it made me sound crazy. He's the one who stepped in it. He's the one who. Rick grabbed my harness strap and yanked me toward a bench under the canopy. My shoulder screamed. I shoved him off with my good arm. He stumbled back, surprised I'd fight him, and that was enough to light him up. "Don't touch me," I said. "Don't fucking touch me." The deckhand flinched. Someone else, one of the hands, moved like he was going to grab me. The ocean slapped the hull twice, slow and heavy, and every head turned for a second like a dog hearing its name. Rick lowered his voice, all menace now. "You're on my boat. You're on my job. If you swing at me, I'll leave you at the dock with no gear and no paycheck." "Do it," I said, because the paycheck felt like a joke now. "I'm not going back down there." "You're not going anywhere," he said, and then he pointed at the deckhand again. "Radio. Now. Report a missing diver." The sponsor rep slid in front of the kid like a wall. "Report a separated diver," she said. "Not missing. Separated during operations. Presumed lost. Still there. You're already writing the obituary." Her eyes flicked to me for the first time. There was no empathy there, just calculation. "Words matter," she said, "especially when lawyers are listening." Rick's jaw worked. He hated being told what to do. He also hated the idea of getting sued. Those two hates fought behind his eyes, and the lawsuit won. He nodded at the deckhand. "Separated diver," he said like it tasted bad. The kid swallowed hard and reached for the radio mic with shaking fingers. He kept glancing at me like I was going to tell him to stop. I didn't. I couldn't. I needed someone official involved, even if they came late, even if they only arrived to rubber stamp the lie. The call went out. Coordinates. One diver separated. Last seen at depth. Search requested. The sponsor rep stood with her arms crossed, expression smooth, like she was watching a weather report. Rick turned back to me. "You're going to the chamber," he said. "I'm not bent," I said again, because admitting it meant admitting they'd dragged me up too fast, meant admitting they'd fucked me, meant admitting my body was now another problem to manage. Rick leaned close. His breath smelled like coffee and cigarettes. "You puked blood," he said. "You're shaking. You're slurring. You're going to the chamber before you have a stroke on my deck." He wasn't wrong. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My vision kept tunneling in and out like a camera trying to focus underwater. When I took a deep breath, my lungs felt tight like I was still in the suit. They stripped my gear off in angry, efficient jerks. Someone cut my wetsuit because my shoulder wouldn't let my arm slide out. Cold air hit my wet skin and goose flesh rose like a rash. My boots left dark puddles on the deck. The water dripping off me looked normal now, clear and stupid, and that made me want to scream because it meant the ocean could put its mask back on whenever it wanted. Rick made a call. The Coast Guard said they'd dispatch. The nearest chamber was onshore, a dive medicine unit attached to a hospital that saw too many idiots and too many pros. They ran the boat hard back to the marina. The whole ride in, the sponsor rep stayed on her phone, head down, tapping, smiling once like she'd landed a point in an argument. Rick stared out at the water like he was trying to find where his day went wrong. I sat on the bench under the canopy, wrapped in a towel that smelled like old mildew and sunscreen. My shoulder pulsed. My knees ached. Every few minutes, I heard it. Ping. Not out loud. Not through speakers. In my teeth. I kept telling myself it was the boat's electronics. Some sonar somewhere. Some radar. A buoy. Anything. But it wasn't steady. It wasn't mechanical. It came in slow, deliberate intervals, like a heartbeat you can't sync to. When we docked, there were already 2 uniforms waiting, not full Coast Guard rescue divers, just local Marine Patrol and 1 Coast Guard petty officer with a clipboard and a tired face. They asked Rick questions. Rick answered in flat, careful phrases. Separated diver. Strong current. Reduced visibility. Search ongoing. I opened my mouth to correct him, and the sponsor rep stepped into my line of sight like she planned it. "You need medical attention," she said, tone soft in the way people talk when they're trying to sound kind while moving you where they want you. "Let the professionals handle the search." "The professionals," I spat. "They don't even know what to look for." She leaned closer, low voice. If you start talking about moving statues and mouths in the seabed, they'll treat this like hysteria. They'll write you off. Focus on your health. I looked at Rick. I looked at the uniform with the clipboard. I saw their faces, the way their eyes slid over me, already weighing whether I was a reliable witness or a problem. My throat tightened, anger and fear tangled. I wanted to shout. I wanted to grab the clipboard and write Trent is turning into a statue in all caps. I wanted to drag them onto the boat and force them to watch the ocean until it confessed. Instead, I nodded like a good little contractor and let myself get loaded into an ambulance because my body was starting to betray me in ways that scared me almost as much as the garden. The ride to the hospital was short. The EMT asked me questions. Did I have numbness? Tingling? Joint pain? Did I do a safety stop? Did I ascend too fast? I laughed again, that broken laugh. They hauled me, I said. They fucking hauled me. The EMT frowned like he'd heard that story before and never liked it. He put an oxygen mask on my face. The plastic smelled like clean rubber and old breath. Pure oxygen burned my throat with a sterile bite. At the hospital, a hyperbaric tech met us with a wheelchair and no patience. Name, she said. Age. Dive profile. I tried to answer. My words came slow. My tongue felt like it belonged to someone else. She wrote it down anyway and wheeled me toward a room that looked like a submarine had been bolted into a hospital hallway. The chamber was a long steel tube with a door like a vault. It had portholes. It had gauges. It had that smell of oil and disinfectant and metal that instantly put me back in the water even though I was on land. They sat me on a bench inside with another guy already there, some recreational diver with a sunburn and a 1,000-yard stare, his hand wrapped in a towel like he tried to pet the ocean and it bit him. A medic leaned in through the open door. We're going to pressurize, he said. You may feel your ears. Swallow. Yawn. We'll talk you through it. I nodded. My hand shook. They closed the door with a heavy thunk that sounded too much like a hatch ceiling. The chamber hissed as pressure started to climb. My ears popped. My sinuses ached. I swallowed hard, tasted salt like I'd been underwater again. The other guy stared at me. His lips moved. You okay? He asked, voice muffled through the mask. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. I didn't trust language. The chamber tech outside watched us through the porthole like we were fish in an aquarium. The hiss changed pitch. The pressure rose. The steel walls seemed to creep closer. And then, inside the chamber, I felt it again. That pressure blink. The air inside the tube flexed. Not with the steady increase from the pumps, but with a sudden inward tug like something outside the steel had inhaled. My cheeks sucked tight to my teeth. My throat clenched. The other diver jerked. He grabbed the bench. His eyes went wide. Did you? He started. I held up a hand, palm out, not to stop him from talking, but like I was bracing against something I couldn't see. Ping. A clean tone vibrated through the chamber. Not through the speaker system. Through the steel. Through my bones. The tech outside didn't react. He kept watching gauges. His face stayed bored. The other diver mouthed, "What the hell was that?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and stared at the steel wall like it might crack open and show black water on the other side. I don't know, I said, voice small and ugly, and I hated how scared it sounded. The medic's voice crackled through an intercom. How's everyone doing in there? The other divers started talking fast, words tumbling, describing the blink, the ping. The medic cut him off gently. You're in a pressurized environment, he said. Sound can travel. Focus on your breathing. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on breathing, and all I could hear was that grinding from the garden, stone on stone, like a crowd shifting in a stadium. I smelled brine that wasn't there. I tasted metal like I'd bit a battery. I sat in that tube for hours while they ran treatment tables, pressure up and down, oxygen breaks, monitors beeping in that calm, clinical way that makes you want to scream because it doesn't match the terror in your head. When they finally let me out, my joints hurt less. My shoulders still felt wrong. My brain felt thin, like the inside of my skull had been scrubbed with sandpaper. Rick and a sponsor rep were waiting in the hallway. Rick looked tired now, like the weight of a missing diver had finally landed on him. The sponsor rep looked fresh, like she'd slept and moisturized and decided the ocean was someone else's problem. Rick stood first. "Coast Guard is searching," he said. "They've got assets out there." "Good," I said. He hesitated. "They asked for your statement." I looked at the sponsor rep. She smiled politely. "I'm sure you'll tell them everything you remember," she said. I laughed again. "Everything you want me to remember," I said. Her smile didn't move. "I want the truth," she said. And it was the biggest lie I'd heard all day. A Coast Guard investigator met us in a small office with a cheap desk and a wall calendar showing a smiling dolphin. He had a recorder. He had a folder. He had the calm posture of someone who's seen too many bodies and learned to keep his face neutral. He asked me to describe the dive. I started with the facts: depth, temperature, visibility, task, location, Trent's actions. I could feel myself skirting the edge of the real thing, circling it like a shark around a boat. He nodded, taking notes. And then he got stuck, I said. "In what?" I swallowed. My mouth went dry. I looked at Rick. I looked at the sponsor rep. Her eyes were on me like a hand on my throat. "In the seabed," I said. The investigator waited. I could have said it. I could have said the statues moved. The sand grabbed him. The center patch pulsed like it breathed. It made a new statue, but I could already see how it would land. In his report, diver exhibits signs of confusion post-incident, possible narcosis, unreliable. Case closed. So I did the thing I hate myself for. I translated the impossible into words that fit a form. "Soft sediment," I said. He stepped into a depression. It behaved like silt that shifted. He sank fast. Low visibility. I attempted extraction. Unsuccessful. The investigator scribbled. "Any entanglement?" "No line," I said. "No net. Nothing obvious." Rick exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding his breath. The sponsor rep nodded once, satisfied. The investigator looked up, and the camera, Trent's camera, the one he'd been filming with, the one that had seen at least some of it. I stared at the desk. "Lost," I said. The sponsor rep spoke before Rick could. "Equipment lost in the incident," she said smoothly. "We'll provide our inventory list." The investigator asked more. How long had Trent been under? What were the conditions? Did we call Mayday immediately? Did we follow protocol? Rick answered most of it. He did it the way supervisors do when they're building a story that can survive court. He didn't lie outright. He sanded edges. He smoothed corners. I sat there with my shoulder aching and my stomach turning, watching them build a coffin out of words. When it was done, the investigator stood. "We'll continue search efforts," he said. "I'm sorry." Rick shook his hand. The sponsor rep thanked him like he'd done her a favor. As we walked out, the sponsor rep touched my elbow lightly, like we were friends. "You did the right thing," she said. I whipped my arm away. "Don't," I said. "Don't act like you give a shit." Her face didn't change. "I'm trying to protect everyone," she said. "Protect your film," I snapped. Rick turned, eyes hard. "Watch your mouth," he said. "Oh, now you care about mouths?" I said, and immediately regretted it because the words made my skin crawl. Rick's eyes narrowed. "You want to keep working in this industry?" he asked, quiet now. "You want to pay your bills? Then you stop acting like a lunatic." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him and shake him until the grinding sound fell out his head. Instead, I turned and walked out of the hospital into air that smelled like exhaust and cold salt from the nearby harbor, and I realized my whole world was still water, even here. Everything tasted damp. Everything felt like it had a tide. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of nightmares. Nightmares would have been easier. Nightmares end when you wake up. I lay in my apartment, shoulders strapped, joints aching, and listened. My building was old. Pipes ran through the walls like veins. You could hear toilets flush 3 floors up, showers turning on, radiators clanking. Normally, it was background noise. That night, every drip sounded like a footstep. Every gurgle sounded like breathing. I got up at 2 a.m. and stood in my kitchen with a glass of water, staring at the sink because I could hear something under it. A slow, patient tapping, not the water hammer knock when pipes shift. This was spaced, deliberate. Talp, talp, talp. My throat closed. I put my ear near the cabinet door like an idiot. Ping. A tone vibrated through the metal basin and up into my teeth. I jerked back, sloshing water on the floor. I stood there shaking, staring at the dark drain like it was a porthole. I did not drink the water. I poured it out and watched it swirl down, and for half a second, the surface of the water in the sink didn't reflect my face. It reflected a smooth, blank oval, like a diver mask fused to stone. I slammed the faucet on like that would fix it. Water blasted, cold and hard. The reflection snapped back to normal. My face looked pale and scared and human. I backed away from the sink and sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the fridge, breathing through my mouth like I was trying not to inhale water. The next day, Rick called. "You're off the job," he said. "No greeting. Indefinitely." "Go fuck yourself," I said. He sighed. "Listen, the sponsor is pissed because her ROV feed got cut." I asked. "She's pissed because you shoved her," he said, "and because you keep saying weird shit. She thinks you're going to run to the press." "She thinks," I said, voice rising, "that a man disappearing is a PR problem." "Keep your voice down," Rick snapped, and I realized he wasn't calling from a friendly place. He was calling from an office, probably with her sitting nearby, listening. I lower my voice anyway because anger doesn't pay rent. "What do you want?" "We want you to sign a statement," he said. "Standard. Incident report. Non-disclosure on proprietary film materials. You get paid out for the day. You keep your mouth shut." I laughed low. "You want me to sign away Trent?" "Don't make it dramatic," Rick said. "It's not dramatic," I said. "It's dead." Silence on the line. Then the sponsor rep's voice came on, like she'd been waiting for her cue. "We're not asking you to sign away anything," she said. "We're asking you to be responsible." "Responsible?" I repeated. "You were medically treated for potential decompression sickness," she said. "That suggests impaired judgment during and after the dive. If you start telling people fantastical interpretations, you could harm an ongoing recovery operation." "Recovery," I said. "Search, whatever word you want. We have obligations to the town, to the donors, to the crew," she said. "We need to control information." "There it is," I said. Her tone hardened. "You have a contract," she said. "You have confidentiality clauses. If you breach them, you will be sued into the ground." "I didn't breach anything," I said. "I'm telling you Trent's dead." "We don't know that," she said again like a mantra. I clenched my jaw until my teeth hurt. "I'm not signing shit." Rick came back on. "Then you're done," he said. "No one's hiring you if you become a liability." "Good," I said, and my voice cracked because I didn't mean it. "Good. I'll go flip burgers." Rick hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at my wet palms like they belonged to someone else. I tried to do the right thing after that. I really did. I called Trent's number, even though I knew it was pointless. Straight to voicemail. His recorded greeting sounded too normal. "Hey, it's Trent, leave it." Like he was going to call back and complain about being stuck in a meeting. I called a mutual contact, another diver we both knew. He answered sleepy and annoyed. I told him Trent was missing. He swore. He asked what happened. I started to explain and heard myself sliding toward the truth and stopped. My throat locked. I couldn't make my mouth say the seabed ate him. It sounded insane even in my own head. "Bad silt," I said. He went down fast. My friend went quiet. "Jesus," he said. "Where?" "The garden," I said. He exhaled slow. "That stupid statue park? People dive that all the time." "Not where it is now," I said. "Still," he said. "You sure you're okay? You sound off." I almost laughed. "I'm great," I said. "Never better." He offered to connect me with someone, a lawyer, a union guy, whatever. I thanked him and hung up and immediately hated myself because it felt like I was abandoning Trent all over again. The Coast Guard called once more for follow-up. The investigator asked if I remembered anything else. I told him no. Elite. I watched my own mouth betray me and couldn't stop it, because the truth didn't fit the world. The world rejects things that don't fit. A week passed. I didn't dive. I couldn't stand the idea of putting my face behind glass again. I couldn't stand the idea of hearing my own breathing trapped in my skull. But water didn't leave me alone. In the shower, the drain made that slow tapping sound. Top, top, top. If I bent down and stared at the dark hole, I swore the darkness looked deeper than it should, like a bruise in porcelain. In the grocery store, I walked past the seafood counter and the smell of old fish hit me so hard my vision blurred. I saw Trent's eyes behind his mask for a split second and had to grip the freezer door until my knuckles went white. At night, I dreamed of pressure, not images, just pressure. The feeling of something huge pressing from all sides, patient, certain. Sometimes I woke with my cheeks sucked tight to my teeth like the chamber blink had happened again. I started hearing pings when there were no pings. In the elevator, a low tone through the metal walls. In my car, a faint vibration through the steering column. On the street, a clean note that made my molars ache. I told myself it was trauma. I told myself my brain was glitching, running loops. I told myself if I kept busy, it would fade. It didn't. On day 8, I drove to the harbor without thinking about it, like my body moved on its own. The marina smelled like diesel and salt and rotting bait. Boats bobbed at their slips, lines creaking, flags snapping. It should have been normal. It should have felt like home. Instead, every ripple on the water looked like skin. I stood at the end of the dock and stared out at the channel. The tide pulled past, dark and cold. Seagulls screamed. Somewhere a bell buoy clanged, hollow and rhythmic. Ping. The sound wasn't in the air. It was in the water. A clean, distant tone that traveled up through the dock planks into my feet. I backed away from the edge like it was going to grab my ankles. I should have left. I should have gone home. Instead, I walked to the dive shop across the street because my brain latched onto the idea that if anyone had answers, it'd be the locals. The shop was small, cluttered, smelling like neoprene and stale coffee. A bell tinkled when I walked in. The guy behind the counter looked up, recognized me, and his face did that quick shift people do when they remember there's tragedy attached to you now. "Hey," he said cautiously, you were on that job." "Yeah," I said. He rubbed his neck. "Shit. Sully, man. Anyone diving the garden?" I asked. My voice sounded too flat. He frowned. "Town put out a notice," he said. "No diving until they remark it. Too deep for tourists anyway. Any patrol boats out there?" I asked. "Any restricted zone?" He shrugged. "Not that I've seen." I leaned on the counter, knuckles white. "You ever hear stories about it?" I asked. He snorted. "About the statues? People say stupid stuff. They say they move. They say they face you. People love getting spooked." My stomach clenched. "Move how?" He looked at me more closely, like he was trying to decide if I was fishing for content or if I was genuinely unwell. "Like different positions," he said, "like someone rearranged them. It's probably just currents and storms and divers messing around." "Divers don't drag concrete figures," I said. He shrugged again. "Maybe somebody with a winch." I almost laughed. "Underwater?" He lifted his hands. "Man, I sell masks," he said. "I don't know." I stared at the wall behind him where they'd pinned photos. Customers smiling, thumbs up, fish held by the gills, divers posing near statues in shallow, clear water from years back. And I saw it. A newer photo, printed glossy, pinned with a little handwritten caption. "Come see the garden once conditions improve." Bright filter, blue water, smiling diver in a shorty suit, arms spread like he was hugging the ocean. Statues in the background like props. My throat tightened. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. The shop guy glanced back. "Town tourism sent it," he said. "Promo kit. Trying to keep interest up." I stepped closer until my nose was inches from the glossy paper. The ring of statues sat behind the smiling diver, deeper water, darker. It looked normal at first glance. The same brochure bullshit. The same art park vibe. Then my eyes caught the back right corner, near the center patch. A new figure stood there. Not encrusted, not softened by time. Too clean, too sharp. Same height as Trent. Same broad shoulders. Same stance that looked like a man trying not to fall. My skin went cold. "Take it down," I said. "What?" the shop guy said. "Take it down." I repeated louder because suddenly my body was full of electricity and I needed him to move. "Give it to me." He frowned. "Dude, it's just a photo." "It's not," I said, and my voice cracked with anger. "Give it to me." He hesitated, then pulled it off the wall, careful not to crease it. "Hey," he said, wary now. "You okay?" I didn't answer. My hand shook so hard the glossy paper rattled. I took my phone out and snapped a picture of the picture because I didn't trust myself to keep it intact. Then I zoomed in on my screen until the pixels broke apart. The new figure's right hand held something. A flat, familiar rectangle embedded in it, half covered by silt. A camera housing. Trent's. My stomach lurched. It tasted bile. The shop smelled like neoprene, and suddenly it smelled like the chamber, steel and oil and trapped air. I zoomed in more, hands trembling. Around the base of the ring, in the sand, faint, fresh grooves. Drag marks, not storm ripples, not old scars. Fresh lines like a crowd had shifted again. Tightening, aligning, making room. I stared at the photo until my eyes hurt. The smiling diver in the foreground looked stupid and happy and alive, and I hated him for it. I hated how normal he looked with death standing 10 meters behind him. The shop guy was talking, voice far away. "Man, you should sit down. You're shaking." I didn't sit. I couldn't. I shoved the photo toward him. "Where was this taken?" I asked. He glanced at the caption on the back. Tourism said Offshore Cove. Same as always. "It's deeper now," I said. "They moved it. The storm moved it." He shrugged, uncomfortable. "Okay. Who took it?" I pressed. He looked annoyed now, defensive. "Some local photographer," he said. "Probably on a boat with a GoPro rig." "I don't know." I leaned closer, voice low and sharp. "If you dive there," I said, "you don't go in the ring." He blinked. "What ring?" "The ring," I said, and I heard myself start to sound like the crazy guy Rick and the sponsor rep wanted me to be. "You don't step in the center. You don't touch anything. You don't." "All right," he said, holding up a hand. "I'm not going. Nobody's going. You're upset. I get it." I grabbed the photo back and folded it without meaning to, creasing the smiling diver right down the middle. I didn't care. I shoved it in my jacket and walked out. Outside, the harbor air hit me like a wet rag. Wind off the water carried that sharp brine smell. Waves slapped pilings. A fishing boat's engine coughed to life. Ping. It rolled through the channel, clean and slow, like something calling. I drove home on autopilot. I got to my apartment and slammed the door and locked it and stood there breathing like I just surfaced from a deep dive. I pulled the photo out and smoothed it on my kitchen table. The crease cut through the image like a scar. The new statue in the background looked like it faced the camera. Not in an artistic way, in a way that felt like it knew it was being seen. I stared at the sink because I could hear water moving in the pipes again. Slow gurgle. Top, top, top. I turned the faucet on and wash water run. Clear, normal, lies. I cupped my hands and splashed my face, trying to wake up from whatever this was. When I looked up, my reflection in the wet stainless basin didn't match me for a second. The face was smooth, blank, mask-shaped. Then it snapped back and my own terrified eyes stared at me. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair and laughed until it turned into a sob I didn't want. I wiped my face with shaking hands and tried to think like a professional again. Evidence. Facts. Steps. I called the Coast Guard investigator and left a voicemail. "There's a new statue," I said. "I have proof. Call me back." He never called back. I emailed Rick a picture of the photo with the zoomed-in statue circled. I didn't write anything polite. I wrote, "That's his camera. That's Trent." Rick replied 1 hour later with one sentence. Do not contact me again. Then, 10 minutes after that, I got an email from a law firm with the sponsor's name in the footer. They reminded me, in stiff language, of my contract. They reminded me of confidentiality. They reminded me of consequences. They attached a PDF of an incident statement and an NDA and a payout amount like they were offering hush money for a dog bite, not a man swallowed by the seabed. I stared at the payout number until my vision blurred. It wasn't even generous. It was insulting. I didn't sign. I printed the photo anyway, made copies, wrote down everything I could remember, depth time, the exact way the dar patch looked, the way the sand hardened, the way the statues shifted like a crowd. And then I sat there with my notes and realized the worst part. Even if I screamed it from every rooftop, even if I plastered the internet with zoomed-in screenshots and angry paragraphs, most people would laugh. Some would call it fake. Others would call it trauma. The sponsor would call it defamation. Rick would call me unstable. And the garden would keep doing what it did because it didn't need belief. It needed bodies. The last time I went near the water after that, I didn't plan it. I ended up there the same way you end up back at a place you got hurt, like your brain is trying to finish a thought. It was dusk. The sky over the harbor was gray-blue. The channel looked like oil. Boats rocked gently, lines squeaking. The tide pulled out, slow and steady. I stood on the dock with my hands in my pockets and Trent's photo folded in my jacket like a talisman that burned. I didn't want to look at the water. I looked anyway. The surface was calm. That's the thing about the ocean. It can murder you and look innocent doing it. A small wave slapped a piling. Another wave followed, and the rhythm sounded wrong, too spaced, too patient. Talp, talp, talp. I backed away, and my heel hit a puddle on the dock, left over from some deck wash. The water was black in the fading light. I looked down. My reflection stared back. For a second, it wasn't my face. It was a smooth oval, mask-shaped, with no eyes. It blinked, not an eye blink, a pressure blink. The puddle's surface dimpled inward like something under it inhaled, and I felt my cheeks tighten even on land. Ping! The sound rolled through the dock planks, up my legs, into my teeth. I ran. I didn't jog. I didn't walk fast. I ran like a man who'd just heard a hatch seal behind him. I haven't gone back to work. I haven't put on a tank. I haven't let myself get sealed behind glass again. People think I quit because of Trent. They think I got scared of deep water. They think I got burned out. I'll let them think it, because how do you explain that the problem isn't depth? It's that the ocean learned how to build. Sometimes, late at night, I still open that photo on my phone and zoom in until the pixels turn into blocks and the new figure becomes a smear of gray and green. I do it anyway because my brain needs to see it again like it's checking that it happened. The camera housing is still there, half buried in the stone hand, like proof trapped in a grip. The drag marks are still there around the ring. Faint lines in the sand like footprints without feet. And the center patch, if you stare long enough, looks darker than the rest. Like a bruise, like a mouth waiting under a thin layer of sediment. Like the garden isn't art, like it's a fence, like it needs more posts.